He blasted rocks for a living. He collected cars like trophies. And somewhere in the rugged mountains of British Columbia, he turned a forgotten scrapyard into one of Netflix's most unlikely success stories. Mike Hall, the man fans came to know as Rust Valley's Rusta Blasta, wasn't your average TV mechanic. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't building a brand. He was chasing something far purer. A lifelong passion for steel engines and second chances. For years, we watched him laugh, struggle, and somehow pull miracles from heaps of rust. We saw him breathe life into cars that hadn't moved in decades. Turning twisted metal into rolling art. But what fans didn't see, what the cameras didn't always capture, was the mounting stress, the impossible math, and the quiet weight that came with turning a dream into a business. Behind every episode of Rust Valley Restos, there was a man stretched thin between his blasting contracts, his car obsession, and the relentless grind of running a restoration yard that never quite made sense on paper. So, when Mike suddenly announced a massive auction, selling off hundreds of the very cars that define his life, fans everywhere were stunned. Why would a man so devoted to his passion simply walk away? The truth, as always, is layered in part financial, part emotional, part deeply human. This is the story of Mike Hall, the rock blaster who became a television legend and the man who taught the world that sometimes letting go is the hardest restoration of all. Mike Hall's story starts far from the glossy lights off television. Born in 1956 in St. Boniface, Manitoba, his childhood was humble, the kind that builds grit. When his father landed a job with the Canadian Pacific Railway, the family packed up and moved west to Kamloops, British Columbia. That move changed everything. Kamloops was a working town built on hard labor and harder men. But it also offered something that would define Mike's life. Proximity to the open road. As a kid, Mike was fascinated by machines. The sound of an engine rumbling through the valley, the smell of gasoline, the gleam of chrome in the sun. These things lit something deep inside him. He'd stand for hours watching local gearheads fix up their rides, dreaming of the day he'd own one himself. By his teens, that dream had already taken hold. He wasn't content to admire from afar. He wanted to get his hands dirty. When most kids were saving for stereo systems or bikes, Mike was hoarding whatever cash he could to buy old broken-down cars. By 20, he was already known as the guy who could spot potential in anything with four wheels. He especially loved muscle cars, those roaring beasts of the 1960s and 70s that defined a generation. "It's in my DNA," he'd say, later in life. "I grew up on horsepower." Those early years built the foundation for everything that came next. The work ethic, the obsession, the willingness to take risks. Mike didn't know it yet, but the road that began in Kamloops would one day lead to international fame. Through backbreaking work, stubborn passion, and a mountain of rust. Before he became the Rust Valley legend, Mike Hall was something else entirely, a rock blaster. He founded Chimera Springs Rockworks Limited, a company that specialized in high-risk, high-reward work, scaling cliffs, drilling, and blasting rock to stabilize slopes. It was dangerous, adrenaline-fueled labor, the kind of work that demanded steady nerves and absolute focus. Most people would shy away from dangling off the side of a mountain with explosives strapped to their harness. Mike thrived on it. "I spent half my life hanging off cliffs and blowing things up," he once joked. The business did well. Really well. Mike earned a reputation for taking on jobs others wouldn't touch. From remote highways to steep mountain passes, his team made dangerous places safe again. And with success came money. Good money. But for Mike, that money had a destination. Every paycheck, every contract, every bonus seemed to funnel into one thing: cars. When he traveled across British Columbia for blasting work, he'd spot old vehicles abandoned in fields or behind barns, where others saw junk. Mike saw stories. He'd pull over, knock on a stranger's door, and ask if the rusted relic out back was for sale. More often than not, he'd haul it home somehow. He wasn't picky about condition. Dents, missing parts, rust-eaten panels, and none of it mattered. What mattered was history, soul, and potential. By the early 2000s, Mike had quietly amassed dozens of classic cars. And his collection wasn't slowing down. "I don't even know how many I have anymore," he admitted once. "I just keep finding an easy can't walk away from." Rock blasting gave him adrenaline. Cars gave him purpose. Together, they built the identity that would one day make him a household name, though not yet. While most people see a rusty car as a lost cause, Mike saw promise. His work took him to small towns and forgotten roads across British Columbia. And everywhere he went, he'd find old cars, relics of another time, sitting in tall grass, waiting for someone to care again. Mike cared. He bought them impulsively, often without a second thought about where they'd go. Hauling them back was an adventure of its own. He'd use dump trucks, trailers, or whatever rig he had nearby. Over time, his backyard became a makeshift museum. Rows upon rows of Chevys, Dodges, Pontiacs, and Fords stretched across the land. Each one had a story, a memory, a dream attached. Eventually, his collection outgrew his property. He bought a 26-acre farm just to house the cars. What began as a hobby had turned into something much bigger, an obsession. People from nearby towns started calling it Mike's car graveyard, but to Mike, it wasn't a graveyard. It was a field of possibilities. Sleeping giants waiting for their second chance. Still, even the most patient partner has limits. His wife eventually gave him an ultimatum. The farm couldn't double as a junkyard forever. So, Mike did what Mike always did. He adapted. He found a new property in Tappan, perfectly zoned for auto-wrecking, and built a new yard right next to the White Post Auto Museum. It was a car collector's dream. Acres of old steel, a proper shop, and a place where he could keep buying without guilt. But he wasn't just collecting anymore. He was building something, though he didn't know it yet. That field off Rust was about to become the setting for one of the most beloved restoration shows ever filmed. By the time Mike hit his 50s, the collection had grown beyond imagination. Hundreds of cars scattered across acres of land. Neighbors talked, his wife sighed. His friends laughed, but Mike, he just kept collecting. Heck knew it was a kind of madness. But it was his madness. "I guess I'm addicted," he admitted in an interview. But it's better than being addicted to something worse. With the new property came a sense of freedom. The Tappan yard became Rust Valley Restorers before the cameras ever showed up. A place where passion ruled logic and dreams outweighed budgets. His friendship with Avery Ski and Connor Hall, his son, turned the chaos into a family affair. They worked, they argued, they laughed, often all in the same day. And while the cars were the stars, it was the people who made it magic. Mike's mix of stubbornness, humor, and heart struck a chord with everyone who watched. When Rust Valley Restorers premiered on Netflix, audiences around the world were instantly hooked. Here was a man who wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing fulfillment. A man doing what he loved. Consequences be damned, but behind the laughter and the greasy banter was something heavier. The reality that passion projects don't always pay the bills. The offer was staggering. $119 million for the land, the shop, and the hundreds of cars scattered across it, but no one bit. A year later, he tried again. This time raising the price to $145 million. Still no buyers, and it wasn't just any property. The deal included a 5-acre lot already zoned for auto salvage, a renovated house, a 900-foot restoration shop, and a 2,000 steel building. He even threw in materials for another 8,000 feet of workspace. And of course, the cars, more than 340 of them, ranging from $200 relics to priceless classics. Mike didn't even know the exact number anymore. Every time he counted, he found a few more tucked away somewhere. To any collector, it was paradise. But to most buyers, it was overwhelming, too big, too wild, too personal. Still, Mike understood. Selling wasn't about profit, it was about closure. He admitted they'd planned to spend his retirement restoring the cars one by one. But life had other plans. A massive 5-year rock-scaling contract landed in his lap. Too big to turn down, too demanding turbulence with his car yard. At 60, the physical toll was starting to show. That's when he knew the dream had to change. It wasn't a defeat. It was acceptance. Mike Hall didn't walk away because he stopped caring. He walked away because he finally understood what caring too much can cost. For decades, his life was measured in cars, contracts, and chaos, but beneath all the noise was a simple truth. He wasn't just restoring vehicles. He was restoring pieces of himself. When he auctioned off hundreds of cars, fans mourned what felt like the end of an era. But Mike saw it differently. It wasn't the end. It was a new chapter. He'd built something real. A global community of car lovers who saw beauty in rust, value in history, and purpose in persistence. Rust Valley Restorers wasn't just about cars, and it was about second chances. And in letting go, Mike proved that even passion needs boundaries. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and breathe. He still blasts rocks. He still fixes cars. But he does it on his own terms now, slower, wiser, and with a little more peace in his heart. Because in the end, Mike Hall's story isn't about fame or fortune, it's about balance. It's about chasing what you love without letting it consume you. He may have sold the yard, but he never sold the dream. And somewhere in the mountains of British Columbia, surrounded by the echoes of engines long past, the Rasta Blaster is still doing what he's always done best, giving old steel a second chance at life. After the dust settled and the auction ended, Mike Hall found himself standing in the middle of something he hadn't felt in years. Silence, for the first time in decades. The fields that once echoed with clanging tools and roaring engines were still. The rows of classic cars once stretching endlessly across the property had thinned. Empty patches of dirt replaced what had been pieces of his soul. Fans from around the world watched the auction unfold online. Some celebrated the idea of Mike finally finding peace. Others couldn't believe it. The Rasta Blast is selling his life's work. But for Mike, it wasn't about money. It was about space, my physical and emotional. He said later that he felt a strange kind of relief. It's weird, he admitted in an interview. You spend your whole life building something, and when you finally let it go, you realize you don't miss the stuff. You miss the stories. Still, he couldn't stay away completely. Mike kept a few of his favorite rides, the ones that meant the most. A handful of muscle cars, a couple of pickups, and a few restoration projects that he swore would finish someday. The show continued for another season. But the vibe had shifted. With fewer cars and a smaller crew, things felt quieter, more personal. Mike wasn't chasing volume anymore. He was chasing meaning. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, fans would still drive by the yard just to see where the legend began. Some would stop to talk, take photos, or thank him for inspiring them to start their own projects. Mike never turned anyone away. He'd lean against a fender, grin under that wild man of gray hair and say, "It's just metal, man. But it's the people who make it worth something." What Mike built in Tappan wasn't just a car yard. It was a cultural landmark. Rust Valley Restorers gave millions of viewers around the world a window into something timeless, the connection between man and machine. But more than that, it showcased the importance of community, loyalty, and love for forgotten things. Mike, Avery Skay, and Connor Hall weren't polished TV stars. They were real, grease-stained, loud, stubborn, and funny. They argued, they messed up, they made bad financial decisions, but that was the beauty of it. It was authentic. People connected with Mike not because he was rich or famous, but because he was relatable. He was proof that you could be passionate, flawed, and still find joy in the mess. Rust Valley became more than a show. It became a philosophy, a reminder that it's okay to chase your dream even when it doesn't make sense, that imperfection has beauty, and that time spent doing what you love is never wasted. Even years after the show speak, Mike's legacy continues. Car enthusiasts from around the world visit Tappan, hoping to catch a glimpse of the yard or meet the man who turned rust into gold. The show inspired a new generation of restorers, young people who now see old cars not as junk, but as opportunities to create something lasting. In the end, Mike's biggest restoration wasn't a car. It was Rust Valley itself. He took a forgotten piece of land, filled it with passion, and turned it into a story that would outlive him. Beyond the legend and the laughter, Mike Hall is a man of contrasts. He's equal parts chaos and calm, a thrill-seeker with a philosopher soul. Those who know him best say that Mike is happiest when he's moving, blasting rocks, fixing engines, or dreaming.